Well, welcome. I hope you are all having a fabulous day, and thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. I always strive to really give you value and broaden your horizons so that you can negotiate your best life. And today is going to be no exception. Today, we are going to be chatting with Armida Espinoza about teaching our children to negotiate with themselves. So, welcome, Armida. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Cindy. Totally a delight for me to be here.
Yeah, likewise. And for those of you who may not know her, I'm really thrilled to be joined by Armida. She is an inspiring author, an educator, an advocate for children's emotional and cognitive development. And she writes these beautifully illustrated bilingual children's books that I would say empower kids to understand their inner dialogue and to challenge those negative voices that often hold us back. And I'm sure you all know something about that because that dogs us into our adulthood. And through her stories and her messaging, she teaches children how to negotiate with themselves, how to pause, how to reflect, how to choose more empowering narratives. And that work, not surprisingly, really fosters emotional intelligence and resilience in our youngest generation. And my goodness, don't we need that today? That is our hope for the future. And we're going to explore how that power of the inner negotiation can shape a lifetime. So let's jump right in, Armida. Like your work revolves around helping children recognize and challenge that negative self-talk, as I said. So what first inspired you to focus on that inner dialogue?
So, my background, I'm a retired teacher. However, when I retired, I decided I used to always love to write, except I always just wrote for myself.
Yeah.
My level of confidence to be able to share any kind of my children's writing was not there.
Yeah.
And so I decided that when I retired, I was just going to hide away in my little cocoon and
Yeah.
just write my little heart away and be a happy little camper. It was during COVID. And the thought occurred to me, why don't you take a children's writing class? I'd never taken any writing classes.
Yeah.
And so I did. And one thing led to another, and they encouraged me to publish one of my stories.
Yeah.
However, the story that I decided to publish was not, it had not even been born at that moment because
Mm.
I was going to be publishing another story. The editor that I was working with was questioning a number of issues. Of course, her expertise is not my expertise. And so, I had to rely on her expertise. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, perhaps this is not the one story that I'm supposed to be
Yeah.
publishing at this time in my life.
Yeah.
So I finally put that story aside and I decided to meditate and just calm myself down because I was getting pretty worked up.
Yep.
And I just thought, okay, universe, what am I supposed to be writing about?
Yeah.
And this experience that I had in first grade kept popping up. And I was like, oh my God, I'd completely forgotten about that. It was an experience that happened in first grade.
Yeah.
I got through it, I thought, and I just put it aside and went forward in my life. And it kept coming up. And I thought, oh my goodness, as a retired teacher, I saw children, hundreds of children experiencing what I had experienced.
Yeah.
And so I thought, I've got to write about that one experience.
Yeah.
And that's where Brave Lollies Learns English was born.
I love that. And I love how at its heart, it's about her, that simple sentence that her mother told her, right? About
Yes,
learning English is easy and fun, and
yes,
how we flip the narratives and it can change our life. It was beautiful.
yes, yes. It helps
And
us
why do you
push
think it's
through.
critical to start so young? I mean, I think you kind of
Oh my
answered
God.
that. I mean, I assume the fact that it dogged you your entire life, as it does for
Yes.
most of us. So, what were your
Yes.
thoughts around that?
Yeah, so that one experience, the teacher had me recite my ABCs. I got stuck at G. I felt embarrassed, ashamed. I felt like I was the only one in the whole first grade world that
Right.
didn't know my ABCs. I think I might have known them. I think I just got nervous. It was a
Yep.
new school, a new teacher. I didn't know anybody. And
Yeah.
you know how you go A, B, C, D, F, G, and then all of a sudden you're supposed to like keep going and
Yeah, it was blank.
blank, right? But in any event, I remember still clearly that moment because I remember thinking to myself, what do I need to do to not be in that embarrassing
Yeah.
situation again? It never occurred because I was only 6 years old. So I didn't
Yeah.
have the mental development to understand, like, oh, you're in school, you're not expected to know everything, you're
Yeah.
going to be learning, and so you ask for help, right? That never occurred to me. What
Yeah.
occurred to me, what I heard in my little head was a voice that says, you've got to do whatever you can to stay under the radar.
Mm.
The
Yes.
end of the radar, don't ask for help. Don't raise your hands because you ask for help, you raise your hand, the teacher's going to know that there's more stuff that you don't know.
Yeah.
Don't ask for help from your friends because then they're going to know that you don't know.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, that little voice got louder and louder.
Yeah.
And that voice stayed with me because by the end of first grade, I was academically behind.
Yeah.
So in second grade, I didn't know what else to do, but just continue to stay under that little radar where,
Yeah.
where I felt comfortable. And I stayed there through high school. Every year
Yeah.
I felt academically behind more and more. The embarrassment was higher,
Yeah.
the confidence was lower. I mean, it was just spiral out of control. It never occurred to me that that had happened to me
Yeah. Well,
until I graduated
and
from
I want to just
high
pause for
school.
1 second and then I'll jump back to you. But for our listeners as well, this is a universal experience that we're hearing about here. And a couple of things are jumping out at me. And one is, as Armida said, that thought that she thought it was just her, right? And we're all in that situation. And I'm sure with our kids, we can see it that when things are happening, we forget that. So we can often minimize what their experience is, where when something happens to them and we kind of laugh it off and expect them to just be able to laugh it off or roll with it, but they're not. For them in that moment, it's everything, and they believe it is only them when it's everybody. And I think about that, and it carries our whole life. In law, all of us, when we were starting our first, when I started my career, we're starting, you're scared to death when you're walking in that room and you don't know what you're going to do, and you assume it is only you. And then we end up keeping ourselves small and we play small. And it's why
Yeah.
so many people go through life limiting themselves and playing small. So sorry to cut you off there. I mean, I
No, no,
want
it's
to
true.
really hit that point. So
Yes, no, it's true, and oftentimes we have a tendency to minimize what children are actually verbalizing. Children are saying, "I can't, I don't know,
yes,
I'm not smart." They're saying it out loud,
yeah,
and we minimize it, and we'll say, we placate them, and and it's like, we say, "Oh, you can push through it, suck it
yeah,
up and push through it, and just try harder," but we don't take to heart what they're saying to us.
yeah,
Children are not resilient.
yeah,
They don't have the skills to be resilient at a young age. Resiliency is something that we learn
yeah.
as we mature.
That's a great point.
Children are not resilient. And that's my new, you know, MO now. It's like
Yeah,
children are not resilient. Don't say they're resilient because then we minimize and we don't pay attention to what they're saying and we don't speak to them
yeah,
about it, about how to push through it.
yeah. That's well, and let's talk because I know you said before, and I mean, obviously in your books explore this that children need to learn to negotiate with themselves, and I love that you frame it that way because everybody says to me, "Well, that's not a negotiate." To me, that's our biggest negotiation. We negotiate our mindset every day. So, talk about what that means to you and how can parents or educators support kids in developing that skill.
Yes, we oftentimes think when we talk about negotiating, we always assume that negotiating with somebody else, a second party, a third party, right? The biggest and loudest and most influential voice that we have is not the voices that are coming in
Yeah,
from outside. It's the voice that we have in our head.
yeah,
So negotiating with our own selves, recognizing that voice, acknowledging what that voice is telling us because sometimes the voice may be telling you to be careful, there's a scary situation, you might be in danger. I mean,
yeah,
so we need to listen to it, but then other times that voice is trying to just protect you in all realms possible, like in me,
yeah,
in first grade, it just said, okay, I'm going to protect you and this is how we're going to do it.
yeah,
And I listened
yeah.
attentively. And so, yes, and parents, we as parents, I think as adults, we need to talk to children and to share what is going on in our head,
Yeah,
even as adults.
yeah,
We as adults are lifelong learners. We will always be learning something new. And the majority of the time when we're learning something new, we're going to be challenged.
yeah,
And that voice is going to pop up. That voice is going to pop that this is some one thing that you're not going to learn now.
yeah,
I'm trying to learn how to play piano right now.
yeah,
I sit down in front of the piano and it's like like that recording has just been turned on.
yeah.
What are you doing? you're too old to start
Yeah,
playing piano. You're never going to learn. You should have done it when you were younger.
of
I
course.
mean, it just goes on automatically.
Yeah.
And I have to sit there and tell myself learning to play piano is easy and fun over and over and over to
Well,
push myself through it.
and I love the idea. And again, I just want to pause for our listeners for a moment to really start playing with that idea and exploring it with your kids or with the kids in your life, whether you're an educator, whether it's your own kids, whether it's nieces and nephews, people in the community, and make it fun. Like be able to explain to them as well that our brain, because the thing that stunned me is something in the neighborhood of 80% of our thoughts repeat themselves. And for most people, the vast majority of thoughts are negative. So imagine the influence of that for your kids and the kids in your life, just constantly repeating those negative thoughts over and over. So why not flip that story and teach your kids, the kids in your life, our brain wants to give us what it thinks we want. So tell it a story, even if you don't believe it in the moment, tell it the story. This is easy. This is fun. I've got this. And keep telling those more empowering narratives over and over again. And your brain will start to look for examples of it. Instead of finding all the ways you're failing, your brain will find ways that you are succeeding. So,
Yes, yes.
what are your
And
thoughts?
along that line, 80% of our children have experienced the imposter syndrome,
Yes. Wow,
which
that's
is,
terrifying.
I mean, first of all,
That's shocking to me.
it's shocking because, I mean, first of all, young children don't, I've never even heard that phrase, don't
Yeah.
even know it, but
Yeah.
the experience that they're going through, right? They're feeling like they don't belong. And earlier you said the narrative that we tell ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes the narrative that we tell ourselves is, I can't learn this. I'm not smart. I shouldn't be here. I'm not worthy. Those things. And when I tell folks, just switch it, right? Say you're worthy. I'm worthy of it. I'm going to be able to learn this. And then people say, well, why are you lying to yourself? And I go, well, why am I lying to myself, telling me that I'm not worthy,
Exactly.
right? That I'm not going to be able to learn it. I mean, because I could possibly be able to learn it. So,
Yeah.
so it's like, we give so much credit to that negative talk
Yeah.
and validity to that negative talk. And we as adults need to speak to children about that. Like
Yeah.
this is what I'm hearing. And so when I do presentations at schools, I could have a cafeteria room full of 120 children.
Yeah.
And I say, children, I want you to turn to your teachers. And I ask all the teachers, I said, this is just for you. I said, do you find yourself that when you're learning something new and you're challenged, that there's a little voice that pops in your head that says that you're not going to be able to learn it?
Yeah.
And the teacher says, yes. I said, that's a conversation we need to have with kids. I said, look, children, I said, you're not the only ones. We have it too.
Yeah.
And then as teachers, what do you do when you hear that voice? And we tell ourselves we're going to be able to learn it.
Yeah.
So children need to, that conversation is so valuable. And parents could have that with their children. The younger, the better.
Yeah, I love that. And again, taking responsibility as the adults. And sometimes, and for our listeners, there's no judgment here. I think with the best of intentions, we sometimes, much like our brain is trying to protect us, as Armida was talking about earlier, as parents or adults in a relationship with a child, we often think we're protecting them by saying, well, maybe you don't want to try that, right? Or why don't you try this instead? Or why don't you try something easier? Which is basically telling that child that you're not good enough, you're not going to be quick enough, and we limit, and then we program them to tell a story to keep themselves small. Now,
Yes.
in Brave Lois Learns English, we follow her as she adjusts to this new language and culture, and you sort of alluded to that. And how does this story help children negotiate their fears and uncertainties when they're faced with unfamiliar experiences or environments, learning new things? What were your thoughts on
So,
that?
in the book, and people say, "Oh, was this your personal experience?" And I said, the first part where I got stuck in first grade in my letter G was my only experience. The rest, I said, it was a children's book. It had to have a happy ending. Unfortunately for me, it
And
didn't.
yours didn't.
It was years later
Yeah.
that I struggled, but I wish I'd had that happy ending right off the bat. But in any event, what the conversation that Lolis has with her mother, with the mother, Lolis is hearing her mother say
Yeah.
to herself when she's trying to learn English. Learning English is easy and fun. And Lolis thinks to herself, why are you saying that to yourself? Because it's not
Yeah.
easy and fun for me. And the mom says, you know, I tell myself because the more I tell myself and I start believing it,
Yeah.
and it gives me the umph to push through, right?
Yeah.
And of course, we need to also be very honest with our children and let them know that it's not going to happen overnight. You don't learn something overnight.
Yeah.
You don't. But what builds character and resiliency is you keep at it, right? You don't give up.
Yeah.
You know that it's hard. Okay, yes, it's hard. But guess what? The more you practice, the easier it's going to get. And so having Lolis go through it, when she gets up and she has to read her
Yeah.
sentences, I mean, that voice kicks in, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody starts staring at her. She gets nervous and she thinks,
Yeah.
I can't do this, right?
Yeah.
And then she has to remind herself again, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
learning English is easy and fun. So just it's a quick fix
Yeah.
that we can do, and we could use it anywhere. I have a little bracelet, and I give these to children, and it says, "What are you thinking?"
Yeah.
I said, and I tell students, I said, whenever you look down at that bracelet,
I love that.
take a second and ask yourself, what are you thinking? Because at that very moment, if that thought is a negative thought, you need to switch it.
I love that. We should get that. Every board of education across the world globally should be. What a beautiful reminder to us
Yes.
to control the thoughts we're telling ourselves. And it's amazing to me. It's such a simple concept, really. And yet
Okay.
we don't do it. And we don't do it ourselves enough and we don't teach it. And I want just for our listeners to remind the power of this, the Roger Bannister story, right? I mean, for the
Yes.
longest time, we believed that it was physically impossible for humans to be able to do a 4 minute mile. And so nobody ever did. And then Roger Bannister ended up doing a 4 minute mile. And there almost immediately the floodgates opened. And now it's
Yes.
common for high school kids do it routinely and less. Once our brain recognized the possibility, so why not train your brain the possibility? And I want to give a plug for your the second book in the series as well, because it's beautiful to think about how we can teach the children in our lives and ourselves, frankly, about our capabilities by retraining our brain. And I love that in Brave Loli's Box of Hope, it was that concept that we can train ourselves about hopefulness as well. It introduced that idea about, I guess, holding on to hope in the face of difficulty. So,
Yes.
what inspired that story, and how do you see hope as part of a child's internal negotiation process?
Yes. So that story actually is based on a true story. When Puerto Rico was hit by a hurricane in 2017, I came home one day and I was flipping through channels and I've seen all the devastation. And so, of course, I was, watching all the devastation. And the anchor woman is, of course, putting out the call, SOS, right? We need medical supplies. We need this. We need that, right? And then there's a gentleman and she interviews him, this little gentleman, and he had heard about the hurricane. He lived on the other side of the mountain from where the hurricane had not hit, and he heard about the hurricane and the devastation. He had an extra bag of grain. He mounted it on his donkey, tracked over the mountain,
Wow.
and came to bring this bag of grain. I cry sometimes when I think
Yeah,
about it because I mean I'm
beautiful.
watching this and I am like crying, right? And so here he's like, I'm hoping to feed, be able to feed some people with this.
Yeah,
That's it. So the story goes, Loli's just watching the news
yeah,
and then she thinks, well, when I grow up, I want to be able to help. And so her mom says, you don't have to wait till you grow up. You can do something now. And she's thinking, I'm just a child. What can I possibly do?
yeah,
And she says, you kind of have to put it out to the universe. It just kind of ask yourself and know that the end, something's going to come to you. There's going to
yeah,
be, and it's about having hope that as dark as things may seem,
yeah,
and we open ourselves up to hope
yeah.
and to a resolution, something will pop up, will come up, some form of resolution to whatever you're being challenged with.
And it's such a beautiful message for today. I mean, always, and for today in particular, I think we were talking, we won't get into politics now, but we were chatting before we came, on recording here. And we desperately need hope in these times. And I don't know that we teach our kids that in a meaningful way to be, and the power of being able to be hopeful. So many of us shut down. I think it's one of the reasons why the world is in such a polarized place now, because people have given up and they don't believe they can make a difference and they don't
Yeah.
have that hope to be able to affect change. So what a powerful combination your books are. And in both of the books, the main character learns to silence the sort of the negative voice inside, if you will. And do you have any sort of process or tools that you'd suggest for helping children to recognize which voice to listen to? Because, there's always the possibility for both or more.
Yes. So I think, I'm dependent on the age of the child, right? So I mean, by the parents sharing their own voice and what they're telling themselves and sharing those experiences, even something as simple, let's say the parent is trying to learn how to play a game,
Yeah.
online, and
Yeah.
and the child has mastered it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
children are
of
so
course.
technology, but that would be an opportunity for the parent to say, "Oh my voice, the little voice keeps telling me that I can't do it, and
Yeah.
and so and just that little conversation
Yeah.
who can go so far because the child goes, wow, it's easy for me, but my mom is challenged and she's
Yeah.
telling me that she's got this inner voice that is telling her she's not going to be able to learn this, right? And
Yeah.
so you could have the child will, of course, turn around and say, Mom, you could do this. Just tell yourself,
Yeah, that is great modeling. I love it.
But just,
At every level, right? It invokes them to be able to be teaching you the lesson you're trying to
yes.
teach them. So it's their idea, but it also models that vulnerability, which we're taught from a young age never to show that. And I think that's where so many of these problems come from. And I love
Yeah.
your books are bilingual. And I don't know if I'd mentioned that for our listeners. So I'm wondering, how do you think that bilingual storytelling maybe enhances a child's emotional literacy and their negotiation skills?
Yeah, well, literacy in any language, right? And of course, you being in Canada, right, with
Yeah.
French, and so the more languages we have in our,
Yeah.
to pick from, the experience. I mean, rewind the brain rewiring itself, right?
Yeah.
I mean, neuroplasticity, it's all over the place, right? And so I think that just by
Yeah.
being exposed to on so many different levels,
Yeah.
whether it's different cultures or different languages,
Yeah.
different experiences, just that exposure really does help the brain, activates the brain
Yeah.
to make those connections that it otherwise may not be making
Yeah. And
if you're
it's
not
interesting
exposed.
because I think some of it is subconscious, and I'm a big believer. I think even having it there raise first an awareness that there are other cultures, other languages, other ways to be in the world that just subconsciously as you're reading is there. But also there's that curiosity piece. And I got to confess, even as I was reading your book, I've read the book and then I went back and I took a look at it and I was picking out the words and trying to see what I could pick up and understand in the other language. So I thought it was really a brilliant way to do it. And I don't know that I've seen it together like that, where you've literally got the, one language on the top, the other language on the bottom. I thought that was a beautiful approach. And
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I did it because teachers are, they have a limited budget. So, if I had separated the books, just a Spanish book and an English book, then the
yeah,
teachers would have going to have to either buy both books or have to
yeah,
decide which one was going to be right. And so by seeing both,
yeah,
having both in one book, then and again, it exposes the children to a different language because
yes,
children will have a tendency to try to
yeah,
if it's there, right?
yeah,
Especially if they know what the subject, what they've just
exactly.
finished reading in English, right? It's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, I think I can figure this one out.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. Isn't that funny how the universe delivers sometimes? Practical considerations like the cost end up having this beautiful, bigger impact,
Yes,
right? That's a better
yes.
impact. So now, can you talked about as a child, and if you're comfortable, can you walk us through a moment maybe when you, other than the childhood one that you shared, where you've had to personally negotiate your own inner critic? And what did you learn
Oh
from
my God. Because I stayed under the radar throughout my elementary, middle school, and high school years, I ended up graduating probably reading at third, fourth grade level. I
that?
was academically very, very low. And and of course, in my mind, I was thinking all I needed to do was just get out of high school, like just
Yeah.
graduate, get out.
Just let me out of here.
Luckily for me, my boyfriend, who was a year younger, now my husband, almost 50 years,
Yeah.
he
Congrats.
he was a year older than me. He had a whole different experience. I was first generation, he was fourth.
Yeah.
Big difference.
Yeah.
His father was a counselor at school. My father worked in agriculture.
Yeah.
He did not have any formal education. So our worlds were really different. So I remember Leonard asking me when he was a senior and I was a junior, asking me what college I was going to go to. My immediate response was, "Oh, I'm good. I'm not going to go to college." Not because I didn't want to go, but because I was thinking, I'm not smart. The college is not for me. You're smart. Good for you.
Yeah.
So we ended up getting married, and what I saw, and it wasn't until we were married that I realized how my negative and my low confidence in myself had really held me back. Because what I saw is my husband and his friends, they would get together, and back then they would be helping type each other's paper and writing and editing.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, these are all people that I thought were really smart. And I'm thinking, and they're having to rely on each other
Yeah.
and helping each other. And I
Right.
was thinking, whoa, I I thought I was supposed to know it all by myself.
Yeah. That's such a great message. Yeah.
And so that's when I realized that it was my own self-talk
Yeah.
holding myself back.
Yeah.
I had negotiated. I thought it was a comfortable place,
Yeah.
but it was a very small world
Yeah, that's
that
a
I had.
beautiful lesson as well. That's got to be your next book for kids because I think that is, as you were saying it, I'm like, oh my gosh, how universal is that message, right? We go through life thinking we've got to do it all and feeling inadequate if we can't do it. When ultimately the world is a better place when we work it as a team. No one of us is going to be able to fix the environment, but you know what? Together we can make a
Together we
difference
can.
if we all
Yes,
step up. It's a beautiful message. I love that.
yes.
Now, we've talked about that inner sort of negotiation from our negative internal self-thoughts, but let's face it, in today's world, well, in any time, in the world generally, it's filled with external pressures, and there are certainly constant comparisons. How can we help children? What advice do you have on helping children stay rooted in their own self-worth and confidence?
Yes, I think by exposing our children to a number of experiences where other children are not as fortunate or are challenged,
Yeah,
and so that our children could see that some of us have strengths
yeah,
that will help others,
yes,
and some of us have weaknesses that we can rely on others, right? Just that living together, right? Coexisting
yeah,
and realizing that it's not my world.
yeah,
My world could be very small
yeah,
and it could be very safe for me,
yeah,
but very limiting, right?
yeah,
So just exposing our children, the more we expose our children to experiences outside. And I know that, nowadays a lot of parents are moving to homeschooling their children. And I think that's a lovely opportunity for children to reap that experience. But I also think that, it does kind of shield a child and it
yeah,
doesn't expose them
yeah,
to the real world, right?
yeah,
The real world is not in your home. The
yeah,
real world is outside of your home.
yeah.
And so we need to expose children to experiences outside, in different areas.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
real experiences. It's funny you say that. I remember as my kids were going, they're in their 20s now, but when they were younger, you go to these big resort locations and these, all inclusives, and that's a very distorted view. And then you believe you've exposed your kids, but it's not. It's just a very Americanized culture that's being transplanted somewhere else. So we would always make a point of going into the
Yeah.
local areas and actually seeing.
Difficult situations, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, I was
But
trying to be
yeah,
diplomatic and
yeah,
authentic, right? Some
yes,
authentic sort of
yes.
experiences for them to be able to see that. And I loved your idea. I want to just circle back to what you were saying, and for our listeners, really put a pin in that because part of it is that teamwork that Armida was talking about, right? That you don't have to be the person who can do everything. As you get exposed in the world, you're like, well, I can do this piece, but you know what? Somebody else has this ability. And it reminds me we were on a trip once where they have those stupid trivia games that I always hated because I consider myself, talk about inner self-talk. I feel like, oh, I'm terrible at this. But I realized just by fluke, we happened to meet these strange people who came together and we were all a team together. We were just meeting each other. And I brought this piece, literature. The very first question they asked was about what literary work starts with Papa, where are you going with that axe or something? And I'm like, oh, I know that it's Charlotte's Web. It's Charlotte's Web. And no, and they're like, are you sure? That's a kid's book. That doesn't sound right. That can't be it. And as they went around the room getting everybody else's answer, nobody else was saying it. They were saying all these deep literary works. And then I started to question myself, oh my God, like I can, and sure enough, it was Charlotte's Web. But then they asked a science question. I knew nothing about that. They asked questions about the crown. Together,
Yes.
we were a fabulous team, but I was able to keep my self-worth because I had something to contribute as well. So teaching your kids that is
Yes.
valuable to hold on to their self-worth. Now, I can't believe how quick our time is going. My gosh, I feel like I got so much more I want to talk about. But the art of feminine negotiation, for me, a big part of what started that was, traits like empathy, collaboration, emotional intelligence that are typically associated as being so-called feminine traits. We've been taught to see those as really a weakness or a liability in big business and politics and, in negotiations. How do your books and teachings, Rivka's, I felt they did you intend, I guess, your books and teachings to reflect those kind of values like empathy and emotional intelligence?
Yes, I did intend for that because, of course, I just, I spilled my guts, my heart and soul to these stories, right? I mean, because they were such a big part of my life. And you're right, we don't speak to those issues, those topics, or those subject matters, right? Because they're not appropriate for business.
Yeah,
We have a tendency to like, oh, leave that out there because this is an office setting and we're
yeah,
professionals,
yeah,
and yet those as empathy, compassion, being sympathetic to
yeah,
situations, those are so valuable. They bring so much. And it is people, I think to myself, the well-rounded person is the person that is all inclusive of
yes,
those elements, right? Not just the academic person that can, just spill, all sorts of
yeah,
science
yeah,
lectures or whatever, right? It's if that person doesn't bring along with them a compassionate empathy, sincerity, that's all part of it. That's what makes us whole.
yeah. And it's so ironic to me that for so long we were taught to see those as weaknesses, and yet some of the most successful businesses now are
Yes,
ones that embrace, how can we give back in the community? How can we, they're the businesses that are really starting to take off. And,
yes.
you know,
I I really think it has to do with the energy that you put out, this energy,
yes.
the
Yeah.
energy you put out, whether it's individual or as a business.
Yeah.
If we have to have faith that, what goes around comes around, that
Absolutely.
saying, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And so I find that as I've matured in my life, I think to myself, wow, there's a lot to that little
Yes.
phrase. It's a
So,
powerful phrase, what you put out, but it does come around. It
yeah.
does come around tenfold.
And that's why an abundance mindset is always so much more powerful than these
Yeah.
scarcity mindsets that we often pass on to our kids. And again, for our listeners out there, we're talking today about how to teach your kids to negotiate with themselves and with the world, and teach them to embrace an abundance mindset. If you teach them that they've got to grab their piece of the pie and it's about competition with your neighbor, as opposed to there's enough love to go around for everybody. There's enough sustenance to go around for everybody. And the more we start to embrace that universally, the more we give. And as you were saying, Armida, then the more we get.
Yes.
Now, I hate to be wrapping up, but I normally end by asking what's one of the greatest mindset shifts that you've had in your life? And again, it doesn't have to be about this topic, one of those aha moments that change the way that you think or show up.
Yeah, so it is that. It is just that the topic we were just talking about is knowing that what we put out, it will come back in
Yeah.
tenfold, right?
Yeah.
And so we need to be very cognizant of what we're putting out.
Yeah.
We need to be mindful of those thoughts, not only the thoughts that we're having within ourselves, but what's coming out of our
Yes.
mouth, right?
Yeah.
What we're saying, right?
Yeah.
Because our words are very powerful, very powerful. And so just being silent and not feeling like you have to be the one talking and sharing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of value in listening
Oh,
and really internalizing what's going on.
oh.
So,
Well, and thank you for saying that. That's it, because we haven't really touched on that in this, and what a great note to end on as well, because we are in North America in particular, we are taught And it was one of the kickstarts for me with Art of Feminine Negotiation that we believe that the person talking the loudest and longest is the person who is winning, whatever that means. And we end up, whether introverts or people who are more thoughtful, their voices aren't heard. We're a very extrovert driven society. So take the time sometimes to just sit back and allow everybody else to speak and not waiting for your turn to talk, but truly listening to what they are contributing to the conversation. Such a beautiful and powerful message. So, where can people learn more about you, Armida?
So they can go to my website, armidaespinoza.com, and the books are available on Amazon. So yeah, people can call me, can email me, and I am enjoying this. This was never on the radar, and this is just a whole other world for me. And so it's been an amazing
Oh,
experience.
I love it. And I was thrilled when I met you. I know you'd said, I'm not sure if this topic is really. I'm like, are you? I think this topic is perfect for the audience. We need more of it. So again, check that out. It's armidaespinoza.com. So www.armidaespinoza.com. And don't panic if you're like, I don't know how to spell that. We'll have it in the show notes. It's worth checking out. Check out the books. They're lovely. I mean, they're targeted book. They're a great book to use with kids in your life, but also as an adult. I got to confess, I got some great value at it. I've just passed it on to my 27-year-old son and said, you know what, read this, Chase. I think this would be a great reminder for you today as well. So please do that. And Armida, it's been just lovely chatting with you. Happy to have you back anytime to continue the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I can't wait. I'm going to be holding you to. I'm going to be following up to find out that book on the teamwork as well, that we each have something valuable to contribute, and together it all makes something beautiful. So for our listeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, and I'm sure you got lots of value from it. Take another listen to it for yourself to really let it percolate so that you can then spread that kind of more empowering philosophy to the children in the world, to the other adults in your world, frankly. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done that, and give the gift of sharing. Share this episode with other people in your life. We all have kids in our life, and I don't know that we're intentional enough about what we're programming that next generation. So, and before we sign off, as always, if you are looking to negotiate your best life and you recognize maybe you need to up level your negotiation skills, not in the way you've been taught to think about negotiation, but that kind of internal negotiation, as well as negotiating with your loved ones and then elevating it to the world beyond. I've got everything from online to group to my signature mastermind and VIP experiences that'll help you better leverage your innate power. Recognize that you do have innate power so that you can negotiate your best life. If that sounds interesting, check it out at artoffemininenegotiation.com. Make sure to grab a copy of my book, The Art of Feminine Negotiation, if you have not done that already. And that's a wrap for this episode. Until next time, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care.